So something had flicked a switch, and I remember then as a result of that, I started to look around, see if there were people somewhere that I could talk to about flying hawks. And you know the usual thing, I suppose, when you start searching, you begin to unravel, and then you find you get a name, you get a phone number, you get an address. And there was a falconry, a public kind of falconry in Robertstown, near the canal, just on the borders of Kildare and Dublin. And I remember going there, and suddenly there was a whole new world opened up, because there was a lot of other people who were in the same boat as I was. They were curious about falconry, curious about hawks. And there was a chap there called Michael Cummins who used to run the place, and he was very good, and he particularly liked sparrowhawks. So we went out with him a few times, and when I saw what you could do with a sparrowhawk and the fun that you could have, then I was hooked, you know.
What age were you at that time?
Well, I wasn't old, I wasn't too young. I was probably in my late 20s to early 30s. Yeah.
Okay. And so from then on, how did you learn? Did you get experience in Robertstown? Did you do an apprenticeship, or did you just go straight into getting a bird and let's see how this goes?
Straight into getting a bird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no apprenticeships in those days. You just learned as you went along. You applied for a license, went out, did your own climbing or got someone else to do it, picked a bird, fledged it, and walked around with it and did whatever Mavrogodato's book said, and then went out and hopefully killed with it, you know.
Did you ever through your life take any breaks from falconry? Did life get in the way, or did you always have a hawk in your muse?
Well, up until about 10 years ago, that was the case. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, what did your family make of your love of falconry? Did they share it? Did they understand it, or were they exasperated by it?
Probably all of those things. Yeah, all of those things, because there were difficulties. I remember. I remember actually taking sparrowhawks on holidays with the children, you know, and I don't think that went down too well. No more of that.
Did you look at it as a lifestyle, or was it just a hobby that consumed you outside working hours?
I'm not sure if a lifestyle would be the right term, but well, let's put it like this. When you take a hawk into your care, or a falcon, it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's it. You know, unless if you want to go on holidays and leave your hawk at home, you've got to have someone who you know you can trust and you can depend on. But if that's not the case, you know, you've got to be there all the time. It's an awesome responsibility. Not like a dog or a cat. You can put the cat out at night, you know, but you can't do that with a hawk. They're totally dependent on you.
Did it ever get in the way of other things in your life, like career, like family? Did falconry ever eat into those things, or were you always able to manage that?
Well, it never ate into family, but certainly it did have an effect on my work. I mean, in the sense that I'm an artist, so it meant that I certainly had considerably less time to work, and also because of the mental, the mental focus that you needed, I think, to keep a hawk fit. This is particularly in the case with falcons, because you know, aside from the times when you would be going out to hunt, there was also those critical times. I used to always equate it to the iceberg, that the bit you saw above the surface was only 1/10, but the real work was below the surface. So when you went out with a falcon on a Saturday afternoon, if you hadn't put the work in with that bird for the rest of the week, during the rest of the week, it wasn't going to perform. And a lot of people actually didn't realise that. That was one thing actually, one vital thing that I did learn in Northumberland, that particularly with falcons, but it also applies to hawks as well, sparrowhawks. People used to think, oh, you can leave it there for 4 or 5 days, pick it up, and it's going to be ready. Flick the switch, and it's gone. That's not the case. You had to concentrate on physical fitness and motivation. They were the key elements, more so with falcons. So I found that when I became involved in the crowhawks in particular, I had to do an enormous amount of work. I would equate it actually to about the same amount of input as you would with a horse for hunting. You had to make sure that that bird, when you took the hood off, was capable of doing what it would normally do if it was in the wild. And that meant that you had to give it rigorous physical exercises to make sure you got the muscle. And then as well as that, the interesting thing was that I found very quickly, and of course I'd seen it for myself with Nick Fox, that that in turn had a very interesting psychological effect on the bird itself. Their motivation was finely tuned. So when the hood came off, they knew exactly what they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be seeing.
Which should you prefer out of the two, the flying of the long wings or the flying of the sparrowhawks?
I think in honesty I would say the long wings.
Yeah.
They were very exciting. They really were.
Yeah.
And what I liked about the long wings as well was I liked the psychological game, the mental game between the falconer and the falcon. And I liked that sort of challenge, watching the development of a falcon and the development of its motivation and its physical fitness, both parallel to each other. And I really did enjoy building that up and maximising it as much as I possibly could. So it was quite an intellectual game for me,
Has falconry with people from overseas? You talk about Nick Fox that you met there.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about other areas, other like people from overseas who you met who opened your eyes or gave you greater understanding of something in terms of falconry, and through their methods that they use, through insights that they provided you with?
Yeah, I hunted with Geoffrey Pollard in northern Scotland, and also with Robert Roger Upton, who flew a wonderful little tiercel along with his son Mark, I think his name is.
Mark's here,
yeah. That was many years ago. I admired Geoffrey Pollard, and I met Geoffrey Pollard because of his connections with Ronald Stevens. And Geoffrey had a moor in Caithness, and he used to go there for July, August, and he invited me up. And that was the first game hawking I'd ever seen. And Geoffrey had a very individualistic way of training his falcons. Nothing extra special, but he used to basically free hack them. And the falcons could fly around all day. And sometimes if they were a bit pissed off, they'd actually fly back from the hunting ground, and you could pick them up with the binoculars, and they'd be perched on top of the mews. Because his hunting ground was just literally on the outside the garden. So he had a very open-minded attitude, and as a result he could fly his birds. A, they were fit, and B, I think this is the knock-on effect of using methodology where your bird is fit, motivated, and so focused. I think the knock-on effect of all of that is that you can actually fly a bird at a much heavier weight than maybe perhaps one might be inclined to think. And I noticed that with sparrowhawks as well. You know, if you took your bird out and it was fit and you hunted with it often, you could almost feed it as much as it wanted. Take it out the next day, and give or take a little bit of adjustment, you could be very successful the following day and the day after that. But it was the problem was that if you were one of these intermittent people where you were kind of, I suppose the word I'm looking for is, if you were a weekend hawker, that's when the problems started to arise. So coming back to your original question of how all this impinged on my work life or my daily life, it meant that if you didn't do that, you weren't actually maximising the bird's capabilities. And you really fell into that category of the weekend hawker. And I've never seen those weekend hawks or falcons perform well.
Can you talk to us about Ronald Stevens? How you met him, what your interaction was like with him, what you learned from him?
Yeah, I liked Ronald a lot. I met him actually. I wrote to him in my capacity as editor of the Irish Hawking Club Journal, and I wanted to introduce a series in the journal of interviewing someone well known for each issue. So he was the very first, and I wrote to him and asked would it be possible to interview him, and he very graciously accepted and invited me over to Clifton, near where he lived, and Rook actually. It's about halfway between Galway and Clifton, and he entertained me for the weekend and talked about how he had built up his collection of wildfowl originally. I remember him telling me that he actually came back from Africa with the complete collection of wildfowl that he had spent something like 3 years collecting on the last German ship to land in a British port in 1939 before World War II broke out. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Is this now when he was living in Bunnagippon or when he was in Fermoil?
In Bunnagippon.
In Bunnagippon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you find him in terms of his falconry anecdotes, his knowledge, his wisdom? Did he impart some of that to you?
Yes, he did. I think probably it was just his sheer enthusiasm for and his love of the bird, particularly gerfalcons. You know, he really did love those birds. Again, he was very similar to Geoffrey Pollard, and it may have even been that he not. I was going to say that he pollinated Geoffrey Pollard's kind of thinking. That he did seem to free hack his birds a lot, and actually, in a way, that was his downfall in Fermoil, because the locals didn't like the idea of falcons flying around on a free rein, because they had that kind of farmer mentality, you know. Ooh, they're going to kill our chickens and we don't like that. So there was a couple of instances, I think, where some of them came to grief.
What advice would you give to a young person entering into falconry, or somebody who's intending to explore taking up falconry?
Don't if you're not prepared to put the time in. Do if you feel that you can make, you can lead you run, you know, have a life, have your fun, have your career, but bear in mind that it's not something that you can pick up and switch on. There's no virtual reality in it. It is reality. And to get the best out of that bird, which it deserves, because they are magnificent, they're aloof, they're intelligent, they're highly motivated, and it's your job to get them to that level where there's only that much between captivity and the wild.